Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kuttan.
You're watching Consider This, the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. Now, tonight on the show, we're going to be looking at how our public spaces and our built environment will need to be rethought, reorganized and redesigned in the era of pandemics. We have joining us on the show tonight Lilian Tay, President of the Malaysian Institute of Architects, which is the professional body for architects in the country, and Nurul Azrin Azlan, Senior Lecturer in Sustainable Urban Design at University of Technology Malaysia. Welcome to the show tonight. It's wonderful to have you both here. Now, I want to talk about living in cities, city living, because what makes cities exciting and vibrant are the very things that make diseases like COVID-19 spread faster. And in the recent weeks and months, we've had a lot of talk about how the ways in which people in high density areas will need to change the way they live, right? I'm wondering whether that talk has been sustainable, whether we've seen real change result from that, beyond the kind of immediate and somewhat desperate ad hoc ways we've seen with the plexiglass and the taped lines on the floor. Has the change been more substantial than an ad hoc change? If I could begin with Azrin.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Well, to begin with, actually, there's a misconception that city living actually fasten the rate of the transmission.
Oh, okay.
Because if you look at places like Hong Kong and Taiwan, and even Singapore, right, these are places which are very high density, right? You could see that they managed to actually suppress the rate quite effectively.
Good point.
So it's actually the governance, you know, and compliance with the authorities that would actually suppress the rate of transmission.
Okay.
I mean, and you look at places like, I don't know, LA, you know, you could see that the transmission rate is actually going up.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Lilian, you have anything to add?
Well, I think Azrin is right. I think there is a need for civic discipline during these times, that people actually behave in a way that consider also the community's well-being. So like wear your mask, it's not just for yourself, but but for the community in general.
Okay.
I think that's needed. But indeed, there are many things that our cities can do to improve our resilience to such future pandemics. I know Azrin just mentioned, and I'm glad she mentioned, that cities are not the reasons that we can't, that for the infections and for the spread. It is how we manage the whole health system, the whole healthcare system, plus also how we manage the existing space in the city.
Can I jump in there? I would say I push back on that, because there is also writing that suggests that some of the qualities of city, the compact living, the compact nature, and the fact that we allow ourselves to be pressed into mass rapid transit, systems, buses and LRT systems, all that becomes an opportunity for a pathogen to spread. And this is not new, is it? I mean, COVID, we've had cholera in the past, sanitation was an issue, so on and so forth. I mean, don't you think that there is something about the structure of our built environments that, yes, if we lack civic, conscientiousness, that we in fact make it worse? But don't we have to deal with the compact nature of cities and connectivity?
Yeah, we do. I mean, if you look at places like Bogota and Milan, for example, right after the pandemic, they started to reclaim some spaces from the street to allow for otherwise commuters who would be taking buses and trains to work to actually cycle to work. So, you know, in this case, the compactness actually helps. You know, because if your commute is like 10 kilometers in KL, and maybe average 15, 17 kilometers commute, and to cycle, that would be impossible, right? But if you live like within 4 kilometers, for example, of the city, which Milan is actually, the average commute in Milan is 4 kilometers, they could do that, precisely because it's compact.
Yeah, I think the issue is not density, but about connectivity and about having a good balance of housing and workplaces in the city. Because right now it's very expensive, and living in the city is very unaffordable, and apartments in the city tend to be very small. I think there is a need for more green areas within the city, pockets of areas such that you're always within walking distance of a small little square. You know, like in London, you just walk 2-3 blocks, there's a little square, not a huge garden. And we have enough overall in terms of the numbers. We've met the numbers. We've got Taman Titiwangsa, we've got Lake Gardens, but you have to drive to it. And in situations like a pandemic, you're not allowed to move or get out of your neighborhood. Right. So we must have that balanced neighborhood where there's enough green areas that you can, even in a lockdown situation, you know, be able to live a normal life. I think the issue is not just about the lockdown. The issue is the whole suspension of the economy when that happens. And we must be able to have a situation where people can still work, can still operate day to day, the economy doesn't shut down. So that we don't have a following crisis after the health crisis is managed. We now have a lot of economic challenges ahead.
Yeah,
so
I want to ask you about this. I mean, we're talking more abstractly about you know, urban centers in Malaysia, because you know, Kuala Lumpur is not the same as the Miri, and so on and so forth. So how do we disaggregate the issues around things like mixed development in cities or suburbanization that might be happening in the Klang Valley, for instance, that produces long commutes? I mean, Azrin, when you teach this subject and you talk to your students, what are you telling them? How to kind of frame the question of urbanization in Malaysia, especially in regard to things like disease?
Yep. I think to begin with, we have to understand the situation on the ground first. And it's true that in Malaysia, we have like strict zoning, right? It's very quite strict zoning. I mean, even in KL, where it's quite mixed, I mean, a lot of people don't actually live in the city center. Do you live in the city?
No, we don't. In fact, we
Yeah,
have
exactly.
a problem.
You're absolutely
Exactly,
right.
right,
A lot of
because-
people don't live in this. They come to the city to work, but they go home and they live in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Right?
So even in a situation like KL, where it has the opportunity to be mixed, it's not, you know. And then you have situation like I'm from Malacca, you know, nobody I know lives in the city center, right? We all live outside of the city center. So I think it's very important to understand this and to really emphasize the importance of having this mixed development, you know, to have this compactness, so that you can actually reduce the commute.
Okay.
yeah, I think you can't underestimate that the city is still the engine of growth, you know, and that will remain, even though of course we have all now suddenly learned to be much more comfortable with working remotely, working from home. But still, you know, you can never eliminate the need for people to meet, you know, to brainstorm, to interact and to engage. So I think the workplace will still exist in the future, but there'll be more flexibility that people can still work from home. So they have more modes to communicate and more modes to meet, you know, on Zoom and all these.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I mean, one of the joys of living in city, I love city. I must tell you, I'm really obsessed with cities. You know, the meat, as you're saying, the communal feeling, the interaction, the diversity is what we've all come to love about cities. And the question is, I mean, should we be pessimistic about the future of cities, considering you know, everybody's now thinking COVID's going to remake humanity? Azrin, maybe.
I'm quite hopeful about where we could go forward, because I mean, if we look again at I'm going to talk again about Milan and Bogota. Milan especially, they have quite a radical urban planner, you know. So they were really going towards more active mobility modes, you know, walking and cycling. So this pandemic has actually given them the perfect opportunity to remake the city, because there's nobody on the streets, right? This is the time to do it, right? So there is no issue with, I think, there is no issue with how we could move forward with fear regarding the pandemic. But I'm concerned about how it could turn out in Malaysia, because to begin with, we are not a society. We are a society which is very car-centric,
Right.
right? So people who actually have a choice, you know, between public transit and private cars, they would choose to drive now, because I don't want to, you know, go into the train and, you know, mix with other people. You know, I would just drive, you know. So and I think to really understand when public transit is successful is when people who actually have a choice choose to take public transit. So yeah, I'm quite hopeful.
But I think, as you said earlier, you know, Taipei, Taiwan, Hong Kong, they cope very well. It's a matter of management during that crisis period.
Is it also about leadership? Because, you know, as you talked about a radical urban planner, do we have a radicals
urban
in
planning.
urban planners, people with, you know, with
Thinking
vision?
outside the box, right?
Well, I think this COVID experience is a turning point, and we all need to rethink about how we do it to be able to be flexible enough and yet to allow, you know, day-to-day life, day-to-day work to operate. You know, cities still contribute 70% of the world's GDP. So, you know, we can't wipe that out overnight. We can't totally change it. Of course, you know, we have new modes. But I think I was actually at the DBKL hearing on behalf of Pam 2 days ago, and I also emphasized this, that we had done the structure plan pre-COVID, and they need to add a new chapter to it, and if need to, give them a bit of time to make sure that KL looks at it with this new lens of, you know, a future pandemic.
That is very
One
interesting.
of the things I asked is that beyond the design of buildings, of homes and offices that architects and planners will undertake, that the city may need to consider more fearlessly the need to convert the land bank of undeveloped, isolated parcels in the city to become parks, such that, you know, that will be the role of the city, looking at the well-being of the entire community. You know, of course, it's very tempting for any local authority to convert that to, you know, more funds, you know, for
commercial spaces.
Yeah,
right,
that's right. But
Okay,
I think the will and the boldness to actually and to appreciate the value of that open space, you know, not just in ringgit value, but what it will that it will serve as one of these things that
the
will
benefits
help
to the
us.
quality of life.
Yeah,
Right?
it
We're
will
going to
add
take
to
a
the
quick break, Lilian,
resilience.
but I want to come back to that because I think it's very interesting in the way we have to change the lens in which we view architecture and urban design. We'll continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to consider this. Hi, if you've just joined us, you're watching Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris. With me is Sharad Kuttan. And we're speaking tonight to Lilian Tay, President of the Malaysian Institute of Architects, as well as Nurul Azrin Azlan, Senior Lecturer in Sustainable Design, Urban Design at UTM. Coming back to something you said just before the break, Lilian, you talked a bit about attending this public hearing about public feedback for the draft of the KL Structure Plan. You said that we need to relook this plan through the lens of future pandemics, like the one that we've, you know, with COVID-19. How else do we need to rethink the way we are city planning, taking into consideration future pandemics?
Okay, I think I'm very clear that public transportation is still the key to some of the major problems in our city, like congestion. So we should have no doubt we have invested a lot of public money in public transportation. In fact, you would be surprised to know that today Kuala Lumpur has the same amount of metro rail service as Seoul per million population. So the infrastructure is very complete, but the ridership is very low. We, you know, Seoul has 70% of the population using public transportation. We have less than 30, about 25.
Is it the last mile problem? Is that what it
there is the last mile issue, and I think last mile issue is not just within Kuala Lumpur. You know, the state and the city needs to work together to ensure, you know, there is a park and ride there so that people can get to the stations. That's one thing. There's a lot we need to do to do it, but we should not even question the need for density to make public transportation viable.
Okay.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to grow our cities and grow it enough to service the increase in population. Now, the issue here is that you know, sometimes so-called transit-oriented development around stations tend to create pockets of high density in areas which are established neighborhoods, and that's where creates a lot of unhappiness because the roads are not ready and they may not come with a larger integrated plan to widen the roads. So I think we need very bold gestures. For instance, we should probably reduce car parks or even omit car park requirements to force people to get onto the trains. And then they will realize it's actually quite nice. It's very fast, predictable, and you can even read and catch up, on
Yes,
mails.
that's
and
true.
things.
I take public transport. I don't have a car.
Yes,
So
but it
I'm
needs
tiny
those bold
footprint.
steps to force people onto the train so that we can then achieve the workability that we've invested.
Okay, I do want to ask you, this is other thing that's becomes so much part of the way Malaysian cities work, and it's air conditioning. And air conditioning, we know, plays a part in the transmission of pathogens, and it's the common flu included, not just COVID-19. Can we design our spaces, the interiors, our workspaces, so much better to make sense of our tropical context and issues of disease as well, Azrin?
Definitely. I think with the use of air conditioning, I think it's also become a bit easier for architects, because otherwise you would really need to consider the position of the sun and things like this, put sun shading materials, devices, But then with air conditioning, you don't really have to consider all these things because what's the problem, right? Just put an aircon there, right?
Lock everything up and then
Yeah,
just
exactly.
air
But
condition.
was that a creative response? I mean, look at the colonial, the colonial period was so inventive in terms of tropical living.
Exactly. I think we are very privileged to have a climate that's very gentle, really. We don't have the extreme cold of winter, only we've got some rain issue. But we naturally can actually coexist very easily with our natural local climate. And we did that in the 60s, but we adopted very easily the models from the West, the closed-up box, because they had to have it because of the winter cold. And so I think we need to revisit even some of our solutions that we had. In real estate, often the balcony is considered like, not so saleable. And I
It's
think
for the
now
compressor. Balconies are for compressors.
now we need to look at it as they are, part and parcel of the needs for everyday living. And we need to put back, for instance, balconies into not just homes, but maybe office spaces should have a breakout area that is outdoors, on every 2 floors, every floor.
Do you think that this pandemic is an actual opportunity for us to rethink design of our built environments, especially some of the built environments that were built many, many decades ago that may not be as sustainable, as inclusive as we want it to be in this day and age. Do you think that we as a society, as clients, as policymakers, will use this opportunity wisely? Azrin, do you think so?
I certainly hope so.
Have you seen conversations that make you a bit more optimistic than hope?
Well, that's the thing. Locally, I haven't really seen this conversation taking place, right? You have?
No?
Have you?
Lilian?
We have put in a lot of proposals to the government in these months. During MCO, they were working very hard.
Okay.
And we have reminded them, they are putting up the 12 Malaysia plan, for instance. We have urged them to please go back and look at all the old public buildings, government buildings, the Majlis building, all the Pusat technologies everywhere, and to revisit them and make sure that they're more sustainable and resilient for the future, and to retrofit them such that they are more sustainable. 10 years ago, PAM, for instance, had developed a green rating tool to quantify how buildings are energy efficient, and there's a lot that can be easily done. It's just changing the lights, changing the air conditioning system, or even opening up some of the spaces to be non-air conditioned, as we had already know can be worked.
Is it a matter of cost? Is it, as you talked about retrofitting all these old buildings, government buildings, is it just that it's not high on the list of priorities of where the budget goes to at the moment?
Yeah, we tend to think of mega projects, as the sort of catalyst and the sort of trickle-down effect. But I think we've somehow neglected many of our secondary towns and cities, and there's a need to go back and make sure development is spread across evenly and take that opportunity to upgrade all the deteriorated housing, public housing in the urban areas, also another area that has been neglected. I think that is what's needed to be done. That's what the government needs to invest in, local authorities need to invest in, to upgrade them and to make them more resilient. The public housing areas were also one area of red zones and clusters, and they need to have better access to open area. We need to clear those crowded streets around, create a little green area. There's a lot can be done. These are small gestures that will need to be across the whole country.
I want to ask you about this. I mean, you clearly as experts and people who understand this from both a theoretical and practical point of view. But who has the ear of government? You have these great suggestions, but who has the ear? who are the powerful stakeholders in cities in Malaysia, Azrin? Can I just say, can I venture a guess? Developers.
Yes.
Tell us, are they the stumbling block to real innovation, creativity?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that Lilian mentioned, with the index, the green index, right?
Yes, the Malaysian Green Building Index.
So the thing is, what I notice is that, say, the building used this GBI, for example, yeah, Green Building Index, and then they would use that as a selling point. Our building got the GBI, so we can charge more because we have fulfilled this particular index, right? So it shouldn't be a selling point. It should be like the minimum. The minimum should be like fulfilling all these things,
It is an investment because you will get your money back in the energy savings, in the carbon footprint that you will reduce. It's all incremental actions that needed every building to even change their lighting, as mentioned.
But Lilian, is the client the king? Is the client the king? And does the king listen?
The client's the king.
To be very fair, I think our government, there's a whole change of ethic. I never saw the KL structure plan 20 years ago, but the City Hall, for instance, had really made it very open, and they have dedicated 2 months to hear out the public. I think the ethic has changed. Local authority is very engaging. There have been many sessions right at the start of the MCO. The Economic Action Council called in the building industry and also wanted us to come up with what are the things needed, the short-term measures and the long-term. And we have made our proposals to them, and I believe they're acting on it now.
Okay. All right. So you talked about local government. So I wanted to follow up with Sharad's question about who are the stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders in government? Local government, so city halls of each city perhaps has a say in how it's developed. At the federal level, who are we talking about? And who are the people at the table making those decisions about how urban planning is thought through in this country? So apart from local government, who is it at the federal level?
Azrin?
What is it? Anwar Musa's...
So federal territories,
yeah,
okay, federal territories.
Yeah.
Do we have local government and housing?
Well,
is that part of the
we have the
conversation?
local municipalities.
Okay.
We have DBKL, for example.
So it's very much at a local government level,
Yeah.
which is often not made transparent to to city dwellers and ratepayers, right? And we often, as ratepayers, we don't really know how. Or sometimes some people are not invested in the way the community is developed, as we've had conversations on this show before. How do we get people living in cities more invested to urban planning, to the quality of city living? Azrin?
Local elections.
Okay, you see that as an avenue?
Yeah,
for
because
getting people
then
more invested?
if you are accountable, right, then you would be more invested in actually fulfilling your functions, right? But if you are elected from above and you don't really have to answer to the people you're actually governing, then what is the motivation? Right. So I mean, local election is one way, I think.
But I think the local government, for instance, Kuala Lumpur has also made some steps. They have invited professionals to be on their board. I think landscape planners and architects to be on their board, and that's a good beginning. I think since 2 years ago, to have professionals in urban planning represented at the level of the city. Perhaps that needs to be emulated also across the 150 or so local authorities, which fall under the Ministry of Housing and Local Authorities.
I want to ask you the role of the media. Do we actually, many of us have the vocabulary to engage in a discussion about the trade-offs that naturally will occur when you're talking about design? Compactness against green spaces, against connectivity versus, going through heritage sites. I mean, these are all trade-offs. How do we develop that? And the media help at all in this? Azrin?
It's very difficult to see this kind of conversations taking place. I mean, I'm very happy that you invited us here today, right? But yeah, it's very important that the media take a role in pushing this agenda forward. I mean, for example, when we talk about the issue of density earlier, right? We have to really make the distinction that it's not density, it's crowding, which is an issue, right? So we can be highly densified, but you can actually design for it to be nice, So it's crowding.
I'm glad that you busted that misperception for me. Thank you for correcting that, and I'm glad. Lilian, any last thoughts before
I would
we
like
have
to add to it affordability. Cities are crowded because of affordability, because of how expensive it is to build and to have a location in the city, because land is very expensive in the city. There is no control on land speculation in Malaysia, and you know, land actually costs about 1/3 to half of the price of a property that you buy. So I think we need to revisit why housing is so expensive. That causes crowding, and how to, and part of it is also because we are so geared towards having a car and having a car park. When you buy a unit, you're also buying a car park. If you actually look at the numbers, the space of that car park is about the same size as your unit, or at least half. A car park is about 550 square feet after you add in the ramps and the lobbies and all the lifts, and you're maybe buying a unit that's 650 square feet. And this is where the affordability issue lies. If they didn't have to buy the car park, if they could use public transportation and they can use it for 30 ringgit a month now, you would be able to afford and get your loan to buy that unit.
Well, excellent points made tonight. Thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate your time and your insights tonight. Thank you. That's all the time we have for this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris.
And I'm Sharad Kudin, signing off for the evening.
Thank you so much for watching. Good night.